Skin cancer is the number one cancer in the United States. But
Yeah.
here's where it gets confusing. We've been told for decades to slather on sunscreen
Yeah.
every single day, but the rates of skin cancer continue to rise. Why is that?
So there's a few important factors. There's some variables we got to take into consideration. So skin cancer is the number one cancer in the world. And in the United States, 1 in 4 Americans will develop it.
Wow.
Interestingly, the most common causes of skin cancer death are not preventable from sun protection. So melanoma historically has been our deadliest form of skin cancer, and it's the number 2 cause of cancer death in young women ages like 25 to 35.
Wow.
Those skin cancers tend to arise from mutations in our skin's genetics that we can't control for. What is important to know is that the sun will contribute, too much UV exposure will contribute to certain garden variety skin cancers that may or may not play a significant role in your longevity, in your well-being, but surely we don't want those.
And what would you consider a garden variety skin cancer?
So things like early squamous cell carcinomas in elderly patients, certain early basal cell carcinomas. And interestingly enough, there's been several really big sunscreen studies. A large one in 1999, it was like our gold standard published in The Lancet, that looked at really strict sun protection with sunscreen versus no sun protection with sunscreen. And the incidence of basal cell carcinomas, which is our most common skin cancer, didn't change. And in fact, although there was a slight decrease in certain squamous cell and melanoma, there was no change in melanoma-specific deaths.
Wow.
So we've become a sun fear-mongering society. I think its intentions were originally good to keep people protected, but we've gone kind of way out the deep end. And I think kind of coming back to normal common sense is a much better idea.
Can you give a breakdown of the different types of skin cancers and which ones are sun-related and which ones are not?
Totally. So there's a lot of forms, but the 3 big ones we talk about, which is the predominant forms in the US and the world, are melanoma.
The most deadly.
Exactly, or historically has been the most deadly.
Okay.
Squamous cell carcinoma and basal cell carcinoma. And these make up essentially 90% to 99% of our skin cancers. Melanoma historically was our deadliest form of skin cancer. A lot has changed in the last 5 years. It's no longer a death sentence. Famously, our former president, Jimmy Carter, had it in his brain, and now he's been alive. We've saved him from dying from melanoma with certain medications, but it's the one we take the most serious because of its ability to spread throughout the body. What people don't understand is that the vast majority of life-threatening melanomas, particularly in young patients, are not sun-driven. They occur in areas of sun-naive skin, backs, abdomen, upper legs, young men and women. In fact, it's the second most common cause of death in young women, but those melanomas don't have a UV signature. So we make this big stink about avoid the sun, but of our most lethal form of skin cancer, it makes an insignificant difference. Now, this doesn't mean go outside and burn all the time. Dr. Teo said, go do whatever, but we have to be pragmatic here, right? Squamous cell carcinoma is our second most common form. And now, unfortunately, it's become the number 1 cause of skin cancer death in the US. That tends to be a little bit more linear in terms of chronic excess sun damage. We see farmers, coal miners, people who live at the beach, deserts with aged, wrinkly, rough skin. Over time, those develop what I call garden variety skin cancers. Interestingly, squamous cells that go on to kill patients don't have a UV signature. The majority of them don't have the UV signature that we see in sun-damaged skin.
So it can cause, or it can be related to squamous cell cancer, but not the most deadly form.
Yeah, and we're just understanding this interplay between sun, our immune system, the skin, cancer biology. There was a really cool study that came out several years ago that looked at cosmetic surgery patients, and they took, when we did eyelid lifts, when we do an eyelid lift, we normally discard the extra loose skin that we take out. Well, we studied the genetics of that skin. And we saw the same mutations in the skin that we see in skin cancers. But those eyelid skins were normal. They didn't have any cancers. So we're just now understanding, well, what does this all mean? What this means is, one, there's a lot more to it than just you get sun, you're going to get skin cancer, which is why I don't want people to fear the sun. What I want them to understand is if you start to burn all the time and too much of it, well, you're not doing your skin a favor. The other important thing is to understand our immune system and how it plays a role in protecting us. We know that as our immune system gets weaker, skin cancers increase. In fact, patients who have autoimmune illnesses, patients who are on medications to weaken their immune system, and older patients have the highest risk of skin cancer regardless of sun exposure.
Just because their immune function isn't where it should be.
The immune systems are the police of our body.
Yeah.
So things grow and our immune system takes care of it. As that weakens, things like weeds grow that we can't control for, and they become a problem.
And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about vitamin D.
Yes.
The sun is probably the best source of vitamin D. I mean, people can supplement as well, but perhaps the best natural source of vitamin D is from the sun, which plays such a critical role in immune function, which protects us against skin cancer. So how does vitamin D factor into the equation?
Totally. And before I touch into that, I forgot to mention the most common form of skin cancer, which is basal cell carcinoma.
Okay.
And that one doesn't have the ability to hurt you in terms of a threat to your life. It doesn't have the ability to spread inside the body, but it is functionally or cosmetically destructive. That is even less understood because in all of our sunscreen studies, and we touched about this earlier, but patients who used diligent sunscreen versus those who didn't, there was no significant difference between the rates of basal cell carcinoma formation. So we're still scratching our head saying, what's the player here?
Yeah. Is it like another ray that sunscreen doesn't protect against?
It's family history, genetic predisposition, immune dysfunction, too much UV altogether.
Yeah.
If it was truly UV related, that rates of basal cell in equatorial countries should be higher than Northern European descent, and we don't see that. That's where family and genetics play a big role. So you touched about vitamin D, and vitamin D is a really interesting vitamin, which is a fat-soluble vitamin that's been studied almost ad nauseum now about its effects on overall health, certain skin diseases, certain internal diseases, all sorts of things. And you're right, I agree with you. Vitamin D, the best source, in my opinion, is skin, is getting it from the skin synthesized naturally. But my medical counterparts will argue that we've looked at patients in heavy sun-exposed areas, surfers, people in Ecuador, Panama, Hawaii, Colombia, and we found that they are vitamin D deficient as well. My argument to that is I don't think our current testing models represent biologic activity. I think just because a level is beyond a certain marker doesn't suggest whether even that messenger or that chemical is doing its job or not. It can't be that everybody in the world is vitamin D deficient. That's silly. And I also don't like supplementation from a vitamin D perspective for several reasons. I see a lot of vitamin D toxicity. Patients come in with a lot of problems from vitamin D toxicity. Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty rare thing, but
no, because everybody thinks that they can self-medicate. And if we're going to treat this as medicine, it should be treated in a controlled fashion. I still think getting vitamin D from the sun is the best source. What we do know is that deficiency in vitamin D over long periods of time have been shown to be a problem in autoimmune diseases, certain cancers. In fact, there was a really interesting study that looked at women in Sweden who avoided the sun for fear of melanoma. And they looked at those who avoided the sun, and they had the same rate of cardiovascular mortality as pack-a-day smokers.
Wow.
And the thought was that their immune dysregulation, partly due to low vitamin D, partly due to sun avoidance, and probably other habits that they were doing in fear of melanoma, resulted in the same immune dysregulation that pack-a-day smokers had. Nobody talks about this study.
No.
And it was over 20,000 women in Sweden. It was a very good study.
Really big group.
Now, I'm not saying if you get a bunch of sun, you're never going to have a heart attack, or if you get a bunch of sun, you're never going to get skin cancer. That's not the purpose of this. But I think being outside produces some natural synthesis of vitamin D that we need, and a component of wellness that I can't measure in a test tube. You feel better outside.
Yeah.
When I was training on the East Coast, I had, what they call in medicine a seasonal affective disorder. I call it just being sad because it was cloudy, and when the sun would come out, I would feel better and I would perform better. I was better at my job. I was happier. And I don't have a test tube measurement for that. But I know when I felt better, I was healthier, and it translates.
Yeah, I don't think science has fully caught up with all of the healing benefits
sure.
that sunlight and that
sure.
everything on the earth has to offer yet. But like you said, it's something that we can all feel and that we've all experienced when we're outside, when we get natural sunlight, not too much, but the right amount.
Yeah.
It feels really good.
Yeah.
You can't deny that.
I agree.